The night swallowed every sound but my footsteps. My shoes were gone. My feet slapped the wet pavement, skin against cold water, every step burning. The rain had started hours ago, but I hadn't noticed until my hair clung to my neck and the world blurred into silver streaks. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't go back. The city felt endless, towers above me like cliffs, lights bleeding through fog. I could still hear his voice in my head, calm and cruel. "You'll never make it without me, Adriana." My heart beat so fast I thought it would burst. Every shadow looked like a man following. Every car that passed made me flinch. I turned corners without knowing why, slipping once on the slick sidewalk. My palms hit the ground hard, skin scraping. I didn't stop. If I stopped, I'd remember the room I had left, the smell of iron and fear. I ran. By the time I reached the narrow streets near the river, my breath came in sharp, tearing gasps. The night was quieter there. A cat darted under a trash bin. The rain eased to a drizzle. I could hear my own sobs, quiet and broken, echoing off brick walls. I found an empty doorway and slid down against the cold metal. My body shook uncontrollably. The jacket I wore, his jacket, was too thin to keep out the chill. I pulled it tighter around me anyway. It smelled like him. I wanted to tear it off but didn't have the strength. I whispered to no one, "You're free. You're free. You made it out." The words sounded hollow. Freedom didn't feel like this. It felt like being lost, wet, and terrified. A sound made me freeze, footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Getting closer. Panic surged through me again. I pressed myself into the shadows. My mind screamed it's him. Marcus had found me already. He'd drag me back, say it was all my fault, say I made him do it. I covered my mouth to stop a cry. The footsteps stopped just outside the doorway. A deep voice cut through the rain. "Are you hurt?" It wasn't Marcus's voice. This one was lower, steady, with a faint roughness. I didn't answer. I couldn't. "I saw you running," the man said. "You shouldn't be out here alone at this hour. It's dangerous." I wanted to laugh at that. Dangerous? If he knew where I'd come from, he'd know danger had a name and a smile. "Stay back," I managed to say, though my voice was shaking. "I don't know you." "You don't have to," he said quietly. "But you look like you need help." I looked up then. A tall man stood under a streetlight, rain dripping from the edge of his coat. His face was half in shadow, strong lines, and unreadable eyes. He looked out of place in these broken streets, like someone who belonged in expensive boardrooms, not dark alleys. "I don't need help," I said, even though I clearly did. He took one slow step closer. "You're bleeding. Your feet." I looked down. Red swirled in the puddles around me. I hadn't even felt the cuts. Everything below my knees was numb. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, who still carried those, and held it out, not moving closer. "I can call someone for you. A cab, an ambulance." "No hospitals," I blurted. Hospitals meant questions. Questions meant records. Records meant Marcus could find me. The man watched me for a long moment. Then he nodded once, as if he understood. "All right. No hospitals." He crouched down so we were eye level. Rain slid off his dark hair, down his cheek, but he didn't blink. "You need somewhere dry. Somewhere safe. I have a place nearby. I'm not going anywhere with a stranger." "That's smart," he said simply. "But you can't stay here. If someone's after you, this is the first place they'll look." He hesitated, then said softly, "My name's Dante. Dante Moretti. I live 2 streets over. You don't have to trust me, but I'm offering you shelter. Nothing else." I studied him, trying to decide if this was another kind of trap. His voice didn't sound like Marcus's, there was no threat, no fake sweetness. Just calm certainty. "I don't have anything," I said. "No phone, no money." "Then you need help more than I thought." He stood and offered his hand. I didn't take it. He didn't force me. He just waited, the rain falling around us in a quiet curtain. Finally, I whispered, "If this is a mistake, then it's mine too," he said. "Come on." For a second, I wanted to run again. But my body wouldn't move. The street was empty. The lights above flickered. If I stayed, Marcus's men would find me. If I went, maybe this stranger would hurt me instead. But at least I was choosing. I reached up and took his hand. It was warm, steady, real. And for the first time that night, I let someone help me stand. We walked in silence through narrow streets shining with rain. Dante didn't speak or try to touch me again. He just stayed a few steps ahead, his long coat moving with the wind. Every now and then, he'd glance back, making sure I was still behind him. "Are you cold?" he asked once. I nodded. My teeth wouldn't stop chattering. He took off his coat without a word and placed it over my shoulders. The inside was dry and smelled faintly of clean soap and coffee. I wanted to give it back, but I was too tired to argue. When we reached a tall brick building with black iron doors, Dante pulled a small keycard from his pocket and scanned it. The doors clicked open. Warm air hit my face. I almost cried at how good it felt. The lobby was quiet, lined with marble floors and soft lights. It didn't look like any apartment I could afford. I followed him to an elevator, hesitating before stepping in. "You really live here?" I asked. "Yes." He pressed the button for the top floor. "And before you ask, no, I'm not going to lock you in. You can leave whenever you want." I didn't answer. I didn't believe that yet. When the doors opened, I expected a small hallway, maybe a door or two. Instead, the elevator opened straight into a huge apartment. Dark wooden floors, tall windows, city lights spread out beyond the glass. Everything looked expensive but lived in. A jacket tossed over a chair, a half-finished glass of whiskey on the counter. "Come inside," he said. "You're shaking." I stepped in, still half expecting a trick. The warmth hit me fully then. My knees wobbled. I grabbed the wall to steady myself. "Sit down," Dante said quickly. "I'll get something for your feet." He disappeared down a hallway and came back with a small first aid kit and a towel. He knelt in front of me before I could stop him. "You don't have to," I started. "I know," he said. "But you'll get an infection if you don't clean these." He took my foot gently, wiping away the dirt and blood with the towel. His touch was careful, distant, like he didn't want to scare me. The sting made me hiss in pain, and he said softly, "Sorry." No one had said sorry to me in a long time. When he was done, he taped a few bandages and stood. "You should take a shower. There's one through that door." He pointed to a hallway. "I'll leave clean clothes outside." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to say I didn't trust him. But I was too exhausted. I nodded and went where he pointed. The bathroom was bigger than my entire old apartment. Steam rose from the shower as soon as I turned the handle. I stood under the water for a long time, letting the heat sink into my frozen body. Dirt, rain, and fear washed down the drain. For a few moments, I could almost pretend I was someone else, someone who hadn't run barefoot through the city, someone who wasn't still afraid of the man she left behind. When I stepped out, there was a pile of clothes waiting, a soft sweatshirt, sweatpants, socks. All too big but clean. I put them on and felt human again. When I came back out, Dante was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. He looked up when he heard me. "Better?" he asked. "Yes." My voice cracked a little. "Thank you." He nodded toward the counter. "Sit. You need to eat." I Saturday. The smell of soup filled the air, simple, warm. He placed a bowl in front of me and sat across the counter, leaning back on the stool. "What's your name?" he asked. "Adriana," I said quietly. "That's a good name." He took a sip of his coffee. "Do you want to tell me who you're running from?" I stared into the bowl. The steam blurred my eyes. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." I hesitated, then whispered, "Marcus Vale." Dante's expression changed. Not shock, recognition. "Marcus Vale," he repeated slowly. "That's a name I know. His not what people think. Everyone sees the perfect businessman, the donations, the charity events. But my voice caught. He hurts people. He hurt me." Dante didn't move for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but heavy. "You're safe here, Adriana. No one's going to hurt you again. You don't even know me, I said. I don't need to know you to see what's been done to you. His gaze softened. You remind me of someone I once failed to protect. I looked away, unsure what to say. The soup was still steaming, untouched. He noticed. Eat, he said gently. Your body needs strength. You can decide what to do next after you rest. I took a small bite. It tasted better than anything I remembered. Maybe because it didn't taste like fear. Dante stood, putting away dishes. You can use the guest room down the hall. First door on the left. The door locks from the inside. That last part mattered more than anything else, he said. I nodded slowly. As I got up, I paused. Why are you helping me? He looked at me across the room, his expression unreadable. Because I can. And because someone should have helped you sooner. The lights from the city cast shadows across his face, making him look both kind and dangerous. I didn't know which one was real yet. I whispered, "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "Just get some sleep." I walked to the room and closed the door behind me. I locked it, then leaned against it for a long time, listening. The apartment was silent. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for footsteps outside my door. When I finally crawled into the bed, I didn't expect to sleep. But the warmth, the quiet, the strange safety of this place, it pulled me under fast. Before I drifted off, I thought I heard his voice through the walls, soft and low. "You're safe now, Adriana. No one will touch you again." And somehow, I believed him. When I woke the next morning, the sunlight streaming through the curtains was so warm and soft that for a few seconds, I forgot where I was. The sheets felt too clean, the air too still. Then I remembered, I wasn't in Marcus's penthouse anymore. I wasn't trapped. I was in Dante Moretti's home. The memory came back in flashes, the rain, the running, his voice saying "You're safe here." Safe. I still didn't quite know what that meant. I sat up slowly, scanning the room. It was neat but not cold, the kind of space that belonged to someone who liked order but also comfort. A chair in the corner held a folded blanket. On the nightstand sat a glass of water and a small note in neat handwriting. "There's breakfast in the kitchen. Eat something. D." It was strange how that simple letter made my chest tighten. People didn't usually tell me to eat. Marcus had told me when I could eat, what, and how much. It felt different to have someone suggest instead of command. I washed my face, brushed my hair with a comb I found in the drawer, and followed the smell of coffee down the hall. The apartment looked even more beautiful in daylight, warm wood floors, tall windows with white curtains, and small plants that caught the light. Dante was sitting at the kitchen counter, sleeves rolled up, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when I entered. "Morning," he said. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it yet today. "Morning," I replied quietly. He gestured toward the counter. "There's coffee, juice, whatever you like." I wasn't sure what you'd eat, so I made eggs and toast. I looked at the food, too aware of the rumble in my stomach. "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged. "I was making breakfast anyway." I sat across from him and tried to eat slowly, though hunger made it hard. He didn't talk much, just watched with calm eyes that never felt invasive, more like he was checking that I was really okay. "Finally," he said, "you slept through the night." I froze mid-bite. "You checked on me?" "I wanted to make sure you were still breathing," he said simply. "You looked exhausted." It should have sounded strange, but his tone wasn't controlling, it was practical, almost brotherly. "Thanks," I said softly. He set the tablet down. "You told me last night that Marcus Vale hurt you. You don't have to tell me details. But if he's looking for you, I need to know what kind of danger you're in." I looked down at the coffee cup. My hands trembled slightly. "He has people. They watch everything. He'll come after me. Then he'll have to go through me first." The calmness in his words made me look up. "Why? You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "I saw a woman running barefoot in the rain. That tells me what I need to know about the man chasing her." I didn't know what to say to that. Gratitude felt too small a word. He leaned back on the stool. "You can stay here as long as you need." This place isn't on any public record. No one will find you. You're just going to let me live here? For now, he said. You need rest, not plans. There was something steady about him, not soft, not overly kind, but solid. Like a person who could stand in a storm and not move. I wondered how a man like that ended up helping a stranger like me. After breakfast, he showed me around. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, an office, and a small balcony overlooking the city. There were bookshelves filled with history, economics, and a few classic novels. Everything felt expensive but not flashy. At the end of the hallway, he paused at a locked door. "What's in there?" I asked. "Storage," he said, then smiled faintly. "Nothing interesting." He must have seen the flicker of curiosity on my face because he added, "I keep things private, Adriana. You should too. It's safer that way." "I'm not planning to go anywhere near your secrets," I said quickly. He looked amused. "Good. Then we'll get along fine." Later, when he left to handle business, as he called it, I sat on the balcony wrapped in his spare sweater and watched the city. The streets below looked ordinary, taxis, people rushing, vendors shouting. But I felt like I was watching from behind glass. It was strange being invisible after months of being watched. When he returned that evening, I was curled up on the couch, reading one of his books. He paused at the door, watching me for a second before saying, "You look better." "I think it's because no one's yelling at me," I said. His expression changed, a mix of anger and regret. "Not at me. At whatever memory he was picturing." "No one ever should," he said quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked, "Do you want to tell me what happened the night you ran?" I hesitated, then nodded. He tried to choke me. I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't angry, he was calm. Like he'd already decided. The words trembled out of me. I hadn't said them out loud yet. Dante didn't interrupt, didn't fill the silence with useless sympathy. He just listened. When I finished, he said, "You were right to run. Whatever guilt you're carrying, leave it here." I wanted to believe that was possible. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the glowing skyline. "You should know something, Adriana. Marcus Vale isn't just a businessman. He's connected to people who do things even I wouldn't touch. If he's after you, it's not going to be easy to keep you safe." I stared at his reflection in the glass. "You sound like you know him." "I do. We've crossed paths." "How?" He turned back to me. "You don't need the details yet. Just know that you picked the one man in this city who won't hand you back to him." Something in the way he said it, calm, absolute, made me feel safer than I had any right to feel. That night, before I went to bed, I heard him on the phone in the other room. His tone was low but firm. "Find out who's looking for her. If Vale's men are in my streets, I want to know where they breathe." I lay in the dark, heart racing, realizing that the man who had taken me in wasn't just anyone. He had power. Real power. And for some reason, he had decided to use it on me. The next few days passed quietly, almost peacefully. I hadn't felt peace in months. I learned that Dante woke early every morning, worked out in a small gym space, and drank his coffee black. He was precise in everything, how he folded his shirts, how he lined up objects on his desk. He never asked for thanks, never hovered, but I always felt that he was aware of everything happening around him. Sometimes he'd disappear for hours. When I asked where he went, he only said, "Meetings." On the 4th morning, I decided to explore the kitchen while he was gone. It was spotless, like something out of a magazine. But near the fridge, I found a small box on the counter, unmarked, sealed shut. When I lifted the lid, I froze. Inside was a small handgun, perfectly polished. The sight made my stomach twist. I put it back quickly and stepped away. When Dante returned, he found me standing by the window, pretending to look out. "You're quiet," he said. "Just thinking," I replied. He watched me for a moment. "You found the gun." I blinked. "How did you?" "I notice when things move," he said simply. Then, softer, "You don't need to be afraid of it. It's for protection, not intimidation." "Protection from what?" I asked. He hesitated before answering. "Men like Marcus Vale. I turned to face him fully. Who exactly are you, Dante? He didn't lie. Someone who operates in places the law doesn't. But I have rules. I don't hurt people who can't fight back. I don't sell people. And I don't tolerate men who do. His voice hardened at that last part. So you're a part of the mafia? I said carefully. He smiled faintly, not denying it. If that's the word you want to use. For a long time, we stood there, me trying to decide if I should be scared, him waiting to see if I would be. Finally, I said, you helped me when you didn't have to. That's all that matters to me right now. He nodded once. Good. Then we understand each other. He walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and added casually, Marcus Vale works with people from the East Side Network, Russians mostly. They've been trying to take business from my territory for months. Him touching you makes this personal. I felt a chill. You're saying you're going to fight him? I'm saying he crossed a line. I don't want anyone hurt because of me. Dante met my eyes. He already hurt you. This isn't about revenge. It's about balance. That night, as we sat in the living room, I tried to ask him about his family. He told me he had a mother and a sister, both living quietly outside the city. He called his mother every evening. I listened to him speak in Italian, his voice soft in a way I hadn't heard before. When he hung up, he caught me smiling. What? He asked. You sound different when you talk to her. Kinda. He raised an eyebrow. You think I'm not kind? I think you're careful, I said. But not unkind. He laughed quietly. Fair enough. Then his expression grew serious. You should know something, Adriana. If you stay here, people might notice. My world doesn't like unknown faces. But I'll handle it. What if Marcus finds out I'm with you? He already will, Dante said simply. And when he does, he'll know what that means. What does it mean? It means, he said, leaning forward slightly, that you're under my protection now. And in my world, that's the same as untouchable. I didn't know whether to be comforted or frightened by that. Later, as I got ready for bed, I thought about the strange turn my life had taken. 2 weeks ago, I'd been terrified to even speak. Now I was living in a penthouse owned by a man who commanded respect with a single glance. And somehow, when he said you're safe now, I believed him. Still, there were shadows in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking, the kind that come from too many years of danger and loss. I wondered what he'd been through to become who he was. As I lay down, I realized that the fear that used to fill me every night was starting to fade, replaced by something different. Not love, not yet, but a growing trust. A fragile, flickering kind of hope that maybe safety wasn't an illusion after all. And beneath that, something I didn't want to name. Something that felt like warmth. Something that felt like the beginning of something I hadn't believed in for a long time. It rained again that night. Not the violent storm of the night I escaped, but a soft, steady drizzle that painted the windows in silver lines. Dante sat across from me at the dining table, the city glowing behind him. A map lay open between us, marked with red circles and handwritten notes I didn't understand. He closed the folder when he saw me looking. Business, he said simply. Nothing you need to worry about. I poured tea into 2 cups. My hands still shook when I poured, though less than before. You always say that. Because it's true. I hesitated. Are you fighting him? He looked up from his cup. Marcus? Not yet. I'm giving him a chance to back away. And if he doesn't? His eyes were calm, unreadable. Then I do what has to be done. The silence that followed was heavy. I knew what he meant but didn't want to hear it out loud. I don't want you to get hurt because of me, I said finally. He leaned back, folding his arms. You think this is about getting hurt? Adriana, I live in a world where danger isn't a possibility, it's a language. People like Marcus cross lines every day. Helping you didn't change that, it just gave me a reason to draw one of my own. Still, I said softly, I don't want anyone fighting my battles. Dante's voice lowered. You already fought the hardest one the night you ran. Let me handle the rest. I looked away, unsure whether to argue or thank him. After a moment, he said quietly, stay here. Don't go out alone, not yet. I can't stay locked up forever. He studied me for a long moment. Then we make a pact. A pact? He nodded. You don't disappear on me again, and I'll make sure no one from Marcus's world ever touches you. Not even a whisper of them will reach you. Deal? It sounded almost childish, like something two kids would swear over. Yet his voice gave it weight. I thought of the nights I'd hidden from Marcus's footsteps, the fear that never really left me. Deal, I said. He extended his hand. I hesitated before shaking it. His palm was warm, rough with calluses, his grip steady but not crushing. For some reason, that simple handshake felt more binding than any contract. After that, Dante called in a woman named Clara, his assistant, though she acted more like an executive than an employee. She brought clothes, a new phone, even identification papers under a false name. Protection, she explained. In case you need to move freely. When she left, I stared at the phone. My name on it wasn't really mine. You think I'll need to run again? I asked. I think it's better to be ready, Dante said. Later that evening, we watched the rain together from the balcony. The city stretched below us, endless and alive. For a long time neither of us spoke. You must have helped a lot of people, I said. He shook his head. No. Most of the time, people don't want help. They want power. You're the first in a long time who just wanted to survive. Something in his voice made me glance at him. He looked tired, as if the weight of the world rested behind his calm eyes. Why did you help me then? I asked. He turned toward me. Because you reminded me that not everything I touch has to turn dark. I didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, I said, you keep saying I'm safe here. Why do I believe you? Because I don't lie, he said. Not about things that matter. I watched the lights shimmer across the wet glass. For the first time since I'd met him, I smiled without forcing it. That night I dreamed of rain again, but in the dream, someone waited for me at the end of the street with a coat and a quiet voice saying, "You're safe now." When I woke, I realized I had started to believe it. Days turned into a week. My body began to heal faster than my mind, but every morning I felt stronger. I cooked sometimes. Dante never commented, though he always finished what I made. One afternoon he said, "You need air. Let's go out." Out. The word felt foreign. He smiled a little. I promise the world won't bite. He gave me a long coat and a scarf and took me through side streets I hadn't seen before. The city looked different in daylight, less threatening, almost beautiful. We walked toward an old building near the edge of Little Italy. Its doorway was guarded by two silent men in dark suits. "Where are we?" I whispered. "Somewhere you'll be safe," he said. Inside was a private club, dimly lit and elegant, polished wood, low jazz music, soft laughter from distant rooms. The air smelled of coffee and wine. People looked up when Dante entered. Some nodded with respect, others stepped aside. The way they looked at him made it clear he was someone important here. "Don't be nervous," he murmured. "They know not to bother you." He guided me to a booth near the back. "This place is off limits to Marcus's people. It's where I do most of my work." "What kind of work?" I asked. "Negotiations, mostly." His lips curved slightly. Sometimes protection, sometimes persuasion. I looked around. Everyone seemed polished, powerful, but under the surface was something sharper. These were people who lived by different rules. One man approached, a tall figure with a scar along his jaw. "Boss," he said to Dante. "You want me to handle the veil situation?" Dante's voice stayed calm. "Not yet. We talk first." The man nodded and left. I realized then that handle didn't mean conversation. Dante must have read my expression because he said, "Don't imagine the worst. There are ways to solve problems without blood. And if blood is the only language they understand?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes. "Then I speak it fluently." Something about his honesty was both frightening and reassuring. At least with him, there were no lies. After a while, he brought me to a quieter room upstairs, a library filled with old books and paintings. "When the world feels too loud," he said, "this is where I come to think." The walls were lined with shelves, the smell of paper and cedar filled the air. I ran my hand along the spine of a book. "You read all of these?" "Most," he said. "Each one reminds me that there's a world beyond this one. You might like it here." "I already do." He smiled faintly, the rare kind that softened his whole face. For the first time, I saw the man behind the control, the quiet thinker beneath the power. Later, as we left the building, the evening lights flickered on across the city. A soft breeze carried the smell of rain. I felt something new stir inside me, a small spark of freedom. "Thank you for bringing me," I said. "You needed to see that the world is still out there," he replied. "You're not a prisoner here, Adriana. You're under protection, not control." "I know," I said. And I meant it. As we walked back to his car, a sudden commotion erupted down the street, shouting, footsteps, a crash. Dante moved instantly, stepping in front of me. Two men darted from an alley, one clutching a phone. The moment they saw Dante, they froze. "Get out of here," he said. His voice was quiet but dangerous. They backed away fast, disappearing into the crowd. "Who were they?" I whispered. "Scouts," he said. "Probably Vale's men." Fear spiked through me again. "So they found me?" "Not quite," he said, scanning the street. "They found me. They'll guess why I'm protecting you soon enough." "What happens then?" He looked down at me, calm even in the chaos. "Then I remind them why that was a mistake." The drive back was silent except for the hum of the engine. I kept glancing at him, at the stillness in his jaw, the focus in his eyes. He wasn't afraid. He was planning. When we reached the penthouse, he told one of his guards to increase surveillance. Then he turned to me. "Don't blame yourself for what's coming. This was always between me and them. You're just the reason I finally have to finish it." I didn't want to be anyone's reason for violence. But I also knew that people like Marcus didn't stop until someone made them. That night, I sat on the couch, watching the city lights while Dante spoke quietly on the phone in the other room. I couldn't hear the words, only the tone, steady, commanding. When he returned, he said, "It's done. No one will come near this building without my permission." "How can you be so sure?" He looked out the window, his reflection blending with the night. "Because I control this part of the city. Every street, every corner. If Marcus's men step into my territory again, they'll know it." I wanted to ask what control meant in his world, but something in his face told me not to. Instead I said, "Thank you, Dante." He turned toward me, his expression unreadable. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you can walk through this city without fear." His words lingered long after he left the room. As I sat there, the rain began again, soft against the glass. Somewhere below, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet war building beneath its lights. And though I knew I should be afraid, I felt strangely calm. Because for the first time since running, I wasn't alone in the fight. The morning after the alley incident, Dante was already gone when I woke up. A single note waited on the kitchen counter, written in his usual neat handwriting. "Stay inside today. I'll be back before dark. Don't open the door for anyone unless you hear my voice." His notes were always brief, but something about the handwriting itself, strong, precise, felt protective. I made coffee, but it tasted like nerves. All day I paced the apartment. I checked the locks 3 times, then 4. Outside, the world looked calm, but every sound made me flinch. The city was alive, but for me, it still felt full of ghosts. By late afternoon, the silence began to suffocate. I turned on the television just to hear voices. That's when I saw it, a news segment about Marcus Vale. The screen showed him smiling for cameras, shaking hands with investors, his face perfectly composed. The headline beneath him read, "Philanthropist expands tech outreach in New York." Philanthropist. The word made my stomach twist. They had no idea what he really was. The phone Dante had given me buzzed suddenly. I jumped before realizing it was a message from him. "On my way up. Don't be afraid." Seconds later, the elevator door slid open. Dante stepped out, still in his coat, rain on his shoulders. His expression was unreadable, but I could see tension in the way his jaw clenched. You saw the news, he said before I could speak. Yes, I whispered. He's everywhere. Like nothing ever happened. That's what men like him do, Dante said. They rewrite their image faster than the truth can catch up. He took off his coat, revealing faint bruises along his knuckles. You fought? I asked softly. Talked, he said dryly. Sometimes words hit harder than fists. I didn't press. Dante had a way of speaking that made silence feel safer than questions. That evening, I helped him cook dinner, pasta and vegetables. It felt almost normal, but normality didn't last long. Halfway through our meal, there was a sound at the window, a soft click that didn't belong. Dante's head lifted immediately. In one smooth motion, he was on his feet, pulling me behind him. The light from outside flickered as a shadow moved near the glass. Then came the sharp crack of breaking glass. Dante drew the small handgun from his belt faster than I could process. He fired once toward the window. The shadow dropped out of sight. Alarms began to wail, his own, not the building's. Hidden security lights flooded the living room in white. Stay down, he ordered, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through my panic. I crouched behind the couch, my heart hammering. Two of his guards burst through the door moments later, weapons drawn. Roof access breach, one said. Handle it, Dante replied. He came to me then, crouching until our eyes met. Are you hurt? I shook my head, too shaken to speak. His voice softened. They were testing boundaries. They won't get another chance. The guards left to sweep the building. When Dante stood again, his face was cold, no anger, no fear, just focus. What does that mean? I finally asked. Testing boundaries? It means they wanted to see how close they could get, he said. And now they know the answer, not close at all. Later, when the windows were sealed and the lights dimmed again, Dante found me sitting on the floor, still shaking. He sat beside me without a word. After a long silence, he said quietly, You're not their target anymore. You're mine now. Mine? I repeated, unsure what he meant. He looked at me then, eyes grey-blue like a storm that hadn't decided whether to break. My responsibility. My protection. Marcus marked you as his, but that ends now. No one touches what I protect. The word mine should have scared me, but it didn't. It sounded less like possession and more like a vow. I nodded slowly. I believe you. He gave a short nod in return. Good. Then sleep. I'll keep watch. And I did, because for the first time in months, I trusted that someone else would stay awake so I didn't have to. The next morning, the world outside looked deceptively peaceful. But Dante's apartment felt different now, like a fortress preparing for war. Two new guards stood outside the elevator. I overheard them talking quietly, their Italian accents low and deliberate. The air itself seemed to hum with tension. I found Dante in his office, standing over a table covered in maps and photos. The room smelled faintly of gun oil and coffee. He looked up when I entered. You should be resting. I couldn't, I admitted. Every sound still makes me jump. He motioned for me to sit. That's normal. You've been living on fear too long. It doesn't go away overnight. I sat across from him. You didn't sleep either, did you? He smiled faintly. You're observant. There were circles under his eyes, but his voice was steady. I spoke with people last night, he continued. Marcus's men are getting desperate. That means he's losing control. Desperate people are dangerous, I said quietly. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me something, Adriana. If you could face him, Marcus, what would you say? The question startled me. I thought for a long moment before answering. I'd tell him I'm not afraid anymore. That he doesn't own me. Not my life, not my voice, not my fear. Dante's gaze softened. Then that's the version of you we protect. The one who isn't afraid. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Fear keeps people small, he said. That's how men like Marcus win. They convince you that silence is safety. I'm tired of being small, I said. He turned back to me. Good. Then stop apologizing for surviving. Something in those words unlocked something deep inside me. I didn't realize I was crying until he handed me a handkerchief. "Sorry," I whispered automatically. He gave a quiet, knowing smile. "What did I just say?" I laughed through the tears. "Right. No apologizing." That afternoon, he let me join him on the balcony for coffee. From there, the city looked endless. For a while, we didn't speak. Then I asked, "Why do you live this way, Dante? Always surrounded by danger?" He shrugged lightly. "Because someone has to manage it. Power doesn't disappear if I walk away. It just goes to worse hands." "Is that how you justify it?" "No," he said after a pause. "That's how I survive it." I wanted to ask more, but a sudden explosion of sound shattered the calm, a deep thud from somewhere below, followed by alarms. Dante was already moving, shouting orders into his phone. "Basement breach," he said sharply. "Get everyone clear." He turned to me. "Stay here. Don't move. Dante. Promise me." I nodded. He disappeared down the hallway, his footsteps steady even as chaos echoed below. Smoke drifted up from the lower floors, faint but acrid. I could hear shouting through the stairwell. My heart pounded. Every instinct screamed to run, but running hadn't saved me before. So I stayed, clutching the edge of the counter until my knuckles hurt. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, Dante returned, face streaked with dust but unharmed. "It's over," he said. "What happened?" "Someone set a fire in the service corridor. No casualties. Just a warning." "A warning?" I asked. He nodded grimly. "Marcus's way of saying he knows where I live." The realization hit me like a wave. "He's coming for you." Dante shook his head. "He won't get that far. He made the mistake of threatening something I protect." He sat heavily on the couch, rubbing a hand over his face. For the first time, he looked weary. Not weak, but human. I sat beside him without thinking. "Why do you care so much?" I asked quietly. "You could have sent me away, forgotten about all this." He looked at me, eyes tired but steady. "Because I've watched people suffer and done nothing. I won't do that again." "Who?" I asked before I could stop myself. He hesitated. "Someone I once promised to protect. My father's violence took her life before I could intervene." The air between us stilled. I understood now the reason he reacted so strongly to my story, the reason he'd brought me here. "I'm sorry," I said softly. He shook his head. "Don't be. You're the reason I'm trying to be better at keeping my promises." The fire alarm stopped at last, leaving only the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. I watched him for a long time, the dangerous man who had somehow become the safest part of my world. Finally, he said, "I'm relocating you to another safe house tomorrow. Somewhere quieter. This place isn't secure anymore." "I don't want to hide forever," I said. He smiled faintly. "You won't. But until Marcus is dealt with, I need to know you're beyond his reach." I nodded slowly. "Where will you be?" "Here," he said. Cleaning up the mess he started. I knew there was no point arguing. Dante's world was built on control, but his control wasn't about ownership, it was about keeping chaos at bay. That night, he stood by the window long after I'd gone to bed. When I peeked out, he was still there, framed against the glow of the city, a man made of silence and storms. I wanted to tell him not to fight alone. But I already knew that was a battle I couldn't win. The next morning, the rain had stopped. The city glittered under sunlight, pretending to be innocent again. But something in me had changed. Fear was still there, but it was quieter, like a shadow learning its place behind the light. When Dante came to say we were leaving, I was ready. "New place, new start," he said as we stepped into the elevator. I glanced at him. "You really think this will end soon?" "Yes," he said, voice steady. "One way or another." The elevator doors closed, and in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just running anymore. I was standing beside someone who ran toward the fire, and I wasn't afraid to follow. The new safe house was nothing like the penthouse. It sat on a quiet street near the edge of Brooklyn, a narrow brick building that looked ordinary from the outside but felt like a fortress once the doors shut behind us. The walls were thick, the windows sealed, and the faint hum of hidden security filled the silence. Inside, though, it was surprisingly warm. Wooden floors, bookshelves, a long dining table, and the soft smell of coffee that seemed to follow Dante wherever he went. He stayed close the first few days, always busy but never far away. When he was home, the tension in the air eased, like the walls themselves respected him. On the third evening, he appeared in the doorway of the small kitchen while I was cooking pasta. "You don't have to do that," he said, leaning against the frame. "I like cooking," I replied, stirring the sauce. "It makes me feel normal." "Normal is overrated," he said, but there was a smile hiding in his voice. "I'll take overrated over terrified any day." That made him chuckle softly. "Fair enough." He came closer, setting his phone down on the counter. "Smells good. You can thank your stocked pantry. Whoever supplies your hideouts really knows their spices." He shrugged. "If I'm going to live in chaos, I can at least eat well." I glanced up at him then, catching the faint curve of his mouth. He looked different here, less guarded, more human. The light from the kitchen window fell across his face, softening the sharp lines that made him look untouchable. "Sit," I said. "I'm almost done." He hesitated like he wasn't used to being told what to do, then obeyed. We ate together at the table, the sound of rain outside gentle and steady. It felt strange, like the kind of dinner ordinary people have after long workdays. After a few minutes, Dante said, "You're quiet tonight." "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About what happens when this ends. When Marcus is gone. What happens to me then?" He set his fork down, studying me. "What do you want to happen?" "I don't know. For so long I just wanted to survive. Now that I am, I'm not sure what to do with it." He nodded slowly. "Survival changes you. It doesn't end when the danger does." His voice was calm, but something in his eyes looked far away, like he was speaking from experience. "Did it change you too?" I asked. He was silent for a moment before answering. "Yes. More than I like to admit." We sat there for a while, just the rain and the quiet between us. I felt strangely safe in that silence. When dinner was done, I stood to clear the plates, but Dante stopped me with a small motion of his hand. "Leave it. I'll take care of it later." "That's a first," I said with a small smile. He raised an eyebrow. "You think I don't know how to clean?" "Honestly?" "No," I teased. He laughed quietly, a sound I'd heard only once before. "I'm full of surprises." Something in the way he said it made my stomach flutter. I looked down quickly. He noticed, of course. Dante always noticed. "Adriana," he said softly. "You don't have to be afraid of me." "I'm not," I said too quickly. He leaned back, eyes searching mine. "Good. Because I'm not the one who hurt you." I nodded, but my chest felt tight. He stood then, slowly, like he didn't want to startle me. "I should tell you something. Marcus isn't just losing ground. He's desperate now. He's made mistakes, ones that can't be undone. He'll come after me before he tries you again. And you're okay with that?" He gave a half smile. "I don't lose when I see the fight coming." I looked at him, trying to understand what it must be like to live with that kind of certainty. "You sound like you've never been afraid." "I have," he said quietly. "I just learned how to use it." The words sank deep. I wanted to ask more, but he was already walking toward the door. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." When he left, I sat alone at the table, listening to the echo of rain and his voice in my head. I just learned how to use it. Fear, I realized, wasn't gone from my life, it was changing shape. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices downstairs, low, urgent. Dante was on the phone, pacing the living room. I caught pieces of the conversation as I came down the stairs. "Not acceptable." I gave him one chance. He chose to burn it. A pause. "No, don't touch him yet. I want to see his next move." He ended the call and turned toward me. He looked tired, but his composure never cracked. "Something happened," I said. "Yes." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Marcus hit one of my warehouses last night. Fire again. 2 men were injured." My chest tightened. His escalating. Dante nodded. He wants to pull me out, make me react publicly. But I won't give him that. What will you do instead? He glanced at me. Finish it quietly. I didn't ask how. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The rest of the day passed in uneasy silence. Guards moved in and out. Phones rang. Dante spoke in short, clipped sentences that made even his own men look nervous. That evening, I found him standing on the balcony, staring at the city skyline. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and the light caught on the scar that ran across his forearm, a thin white line, old but deep. I stepped closer. You should sit. You haven't eaten. He didn't look at me. I can't eat when my people bleed. The quiet fury in his voice startled me. You blame yourself? I asked. I lead them, he said simply. Their risks are mine. We stood in silence. The air smelled faintly of smoke from somewhere far away. Finally, I said, you can't carry every fight alone, Dante. He turned to me, and for a moment, I saw the exhaustion beneath his control. And you can't spend your life waiting for the next person to hurt you. The words hit hard, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I'm trying, I said quietly. I know, he said, his voice softening. And you're doing better than you think. He reached out then, slowly, like always, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His touch was careful, warm. My heart stuttered, but I didn't move away. Adriana, he said, almost a whisper, the world I live in doesn't forgive mistakes. When I fight Marcus, there will be no half measures. You understand what that means? I swallowed. It means he doesn't walk away. He didn't answer, but his eyes confirmed it. Part of me should have been horrified. But instead, I felt only the quiet pulse of inevitability. Marcus had taken so much from me, my freedom, my trust, my peace. If Dante was the storm that ended him, I wouldn't stop it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls felt too quiet, the air too heavy. Around midnight, I walked into the living room and found Dante still awake, sitting on the couch with a glass of water. Couldn't sleep? He asked. I shook my head. Neither could you. He smiled faintly. Seems we're both haunted. I sat beside him, the space between us small but deliberate. When do you think it'll end? Soon, he said. But endings come with a price. Are you ready to pay it? He looked at me for a long time. Always. We sat in silence again, the kind that isn't empty but full of things unsaid. After a moment, he said, you know what's strange? I've spent my whole life building walls to keep people out. Then one night I find a woman sitting in the rain, and suddenly the walls don't work anymore. I looked at him, my throat tight. And that's a bad thing. It's unfamiliar, he said softly. I smiled faintly. Maybe that's not so bad. He didn't answer, but his eyes softened. We talked quietly until dawn about small things, ordinary things. For the first time, I learned what kind of music he liked, that he once wanted to be an architect, that he still visited his mother every week without fail. It was strange to think that a man feared by half the city still cared about things like family and memory. When morning light crept through the curtains, Dante stood. Stay inside today. No visitors, no calls. I'll end this before it reaches you. Be careful, I said. He smiled, just slightly. Always. Then he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of coffee and rain behind. Hours passed before I heard anything. The phone buzzed once, an unknown number, a single message. It's over. You're safe. I didn't know if that meant Marcus was gone or simply running. I didn't ask. When Dante returned that night, his expression told me everything. His coat was damp, his hands faintly bruised, but there was calm in his eyes. It's finished, he said. How? I whispered. His leaving the city, he said simply. He won't come back. Did you? He cut me off gently. Don't ask, Adriana. Some answers don't help you heal. He turned away, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, thank you. He looked back, expression unreadable. Don't thank me for doing what had to be done. But I did thank him, silently, deeply. Because in that moment, The air around me finally felt like freedom. That night, I stood at the window, looking out at the city lights that shimmered against the wet streets. I thought about fear, how it had ruled my life for so long, how Dante had shown me it didn't have to. Behind me, his voice broke the quiet. "You're free now, Adriana. Whatever comes next, it's yours to choose." I turned and saw him standing in the doorway, shadows tracing his face, the faintest exhaustion in his eyes. "I don't even know who I am anymore," I said. "Then we start there," he replied. "Finding out who you are when you're no longer running." He said it so simply, like rebuilding a life was just another problem to solve. But something in his voice made me believe him. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without dreams. And in the silence of the safe house, I realized something I hadn't dared to think before. The storm was over. But maybe, just maybe, I'd found peace in the eye of it. Peace is strange. It doesn't arrive like thunder or lightning. It seeps in slowly, almost shyly, like dawn through half-closed curtains. Days passed after Dante told me Marcus was gone. The silence that followed should have been comforting, but it felt too large. After months of fear, I didn't know what to do with calm. I started cleaning just to fill the hours. I organized cupboards, washed dishes that weren't dirty, even rearranged the books on the shelf. Anything to avoid sitting still long enough to remember. Dante noticed, of course. He always noticed. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen, wiping the counter for the third time, when he walked in. "That counter's going to disappear if you keep cleaning it," he said. I smiled faintly. "I don't know what else to do." "Try resting," he suggested, leaning against the doorway. "I don't know how to do that either." He studied me for a moment, then walked over and took the cloth gently from my hand. "Then let me show you." He led me out to the small balcony at the back of the house. The city stretched below, humming quietly under the late afternoon sun. "Breathe," he said. "I am." "No," he corrected softly. "You're surviving." "That's not the same." So I tried again. Deep breath in. Long breath out. It felt awkward at first, but something loosened in my chest. I spent so long listening for footsteps behind me, I said quietly. "It's strange not to hear them anymore." Dante looked out at the skyline. "You'll stop listening eventually." "Do you ever stop listening?" He didn't answer right away. "Not really," he admitted. "But I learned to let the noise mean something different." "Like what?" "Like a reminder that I'm still here." His words hung in the air, gentle but heavy with experience. We stood there for a long time. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It felt full. Finally, I asked, "What happens now, Dante?" He turned to face me. "Now, you live." "That's too simple." He gave a small smile. "It's not simple. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But you're ready." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe I could step back into the world and not carry my fear like a second skin. That evening, I cooked again, this time because I wanted to, not because I needed to fill the silence. Dante joined me without a word, chopping vegetables like he'd done it 100 times. When we sat down to eat, he said, "There's something I need to tell you." My heart stilled. "What is it?" "I'm leaving the city for a few days. There's business to close. I don't want you alone, so Clara will stay here." Clara, the efficient woman with sharp eyes and a quiet, commanding presence. I trusted her. Still, the thought of Dante leaving made something twist inside me. "When will you be back?" I asked. "As soon as I can," he said. "You'll be safe here. I promise." I nodded, though the idea of his absence felt heavier than I expected. Before bed, he paused by my door. "You've come farther than you think, Adriana. Because of you." He shook his head. "No. Because you refused to break." He left early the next morning before sunrise. When I woke, his coffee mug was still on the counter, a small ring of dark liquid marking where it had been. The house felt different without him, quieter, colder. Clara arrived soon after, her presence efficient but distant. The first day passed slowly. I read, watched the rain, tried to convince myself that stillness was peace. But by nightfall, I caught myself listening for his voice at the door. The second day, I found myself standing by the balcony again, watching the horizon, wondering where he was. I realized then that safety wasn't what I missed most. It was the sound of someone else breathing in the same room, proof that I wasn't alone anymore. Dante returned on the third night. I didn't hear the door open. I only knew he was back when his voice drifted softly through the dark. Couldn't sleep. I turned to see him standing by the doorway, jacket damp from rain, hair disheveled. The sight of him was strangely grounding. I tried, I said. Didn't work. He smiled faintly. Some things never change. He crossed the room and sat across from me. His eyes looked tired, but his presence filled the space like warmth returning to a cold room. Was it bad? I asked quietly. He hesitated before answering. It's done. But peace always comes with a cost. What kind of cost? Nothing you need to worry about. I gave him a look. That's not an answer. He chuckled softly. No, it's not. We sat in silence for a while. Then, after a long moment, he said, Marcus is gone. Not just from the city, he's gone for good. I didn't ask how. I didn't need to. There was finality in his voice, the kind that didn't need details. For a long moment, I just breathed. The weight that had sat on my chest for months felt lighter, almost gone. It's really over, I whispered. It's over, he confirmed. I should have felt nothing but relief, but another feeling crept in, something quieter, deeper. Grief, maybe, not for Marcus, but for everything that had been lost in the fight to escape him. I don't know who I am without fear, I admitted. You'll find out, he said gently. The person who survives isn't the same as the one who ran. He leaned forward, his voice softer. You don't owe anyone an explanation for living. The room felt heavy with meaning. The rain outside had stopped, but its rhythm still echoed faintly in the gutters. I looked at him, really looked at the faint scars, the quiet exhaustion, the strength that had protected me. You look tired, I said. He smiled a little. I am. Why do you keep fighting, Dante? Even when you could walk away. He exhaled slowly. Because walking away doesn't erase the blood. It just lets it dry without purpose. The honesty in his words both scared and comforted me. You think you're saving people, I said quietly. But maybe they're saving you too. His eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, everything stilled. Maybe you're right. The space between us felt charged, not romantic, exactly, but real, like two people seeing the truth of each other for the first time. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small envelope. What's this? Your new life, he said simply. New ID, new papers, new bank account. You can start over anywhere. I stared at the envelope. You did all this. I told you I'd protect you. That includes your future. But where would I even go? He shrugged. Wherever you want. No one will follow. I held the envelope in my hands, the paper soft and heavy. What if I'm not ready to leave? He looked at me then, something unreadable in his expression. Then you stay. No one's pushing you out. Would you want me to? He was quiet for a long moment before answering. I want you to do what makes you free. I smiled faintly. That's not an answer either. He laughed softly, shaking his head. You're impossible to argue with. The sound of his laugh filled the room, warm and unfamiliar. I realized I hadn't heard it enough. When I stood to go to bed, he caught my wrist gently, not to stop me, just to hold my attention. Adriana, he said quietly. You don't have to keep looking over your shoulder anymore. I know. Then start living like it. I nodded, feeling the truth of it sink in. That night, I dreamed of light instead of darkness, sunlight spilling through open windows, the sound of laughter I couldn't quite place. When I woke, the house was filled with the smell of coffee again. Dante was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, the morning sun turning the steam gold. He looked up when he saw me. Good morning. Good morning, I echoed, smiling. It struck me then how ordinary it all looked. After everything, the running, the fear, the fire, this quiet morning felt like a miracle. As we ate breakfast, he said, Clara has connections overseas. If you ever decide to leave, she'll arrange it. And you? I'll be here, he said simply. Someone has to keep the city from eating itself alive. I looked down at my plate, then back up at him. Maybe you should let someone else carry it for a while. He smiled faintly. Maybe I already have. Outside, the city was waking up, sunlight glinting off rooftops still wet from the night before. The world was moving forward, and for the first time, I felt like I could move with it. As Dante stood to leave for another meeting, I said, "You once told me that fear doesn't disappear, it changes. What does peace change into?" He paused at the door. "Hope," he said. "If you let it." When the door closed behind him, I looked at the envelope still lying on the table. My name, my new name, was printed in clean black ink. It didn't feel like running this time. It felt like a beginning. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. I was waiting to live. That evening, I stood by the balcony again, watching the sun dip below the skyline. The city looked different now, still vast, still unpredictable, but no longer my enemy. Behind me, I could still hear Dante's voice in memory, "Now, you live." And I finally understood what he meant. The story that began with fear had not ended in vengeance. It had ended in freedom. Quiet, simple, breathtaking freedom. A week passed after Dante's return, and for the first time in years, the days didn't blend together. Each morning I woke to sunlight instead of fear. Each night I slept without listening for footsteps. Still, peace felt unfamiliar, like wearing someone else's coat. It fit, but not perfectly. I started going on walks again, always careful, always alert. Dante insisted I take one of his men with me, a quiet guard named Luca. He never spoke much, just followed at a distance, letting me breathe in open air again. The city had changed since the night I ran barefoot through it. Or maybe I had. The same streets that once felt like a maze now looked almost beautiful in daylight, coffee shops opening their doors, children laughing, vendors shouting over the smell of bread and rain. Sometimes I caught people's reflections in the windows and saw my own face among them, calmer, older somehow. When I returned to the safe house, Dante was usually in his office, surrounded by papers, phone calls, and quiet power. He didn't talk about his work, but I noticed the tension in his shoulders slowly fade. Whatever war he'd been fighting, it was settling. One afternoon, I brought him coffee. He looked up from his desk and smiled. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," I said. "I wanted to." He accepted it with a small nod. "You're restless." "Maybe," I admitted. "I keep thinking there must be something more than hiding." "You're not hiding anymore," he said. "You're rebuilding." I laughed softly. "Feels the same some days." He leaned back in his chair. "Then build something worth staying for." The words lingered in the air. I thought about them the rest of the day. That evening, I found an old sketchbook among the things Clara had brought when she moved me in. I hadn't drawn since before Marcus, before fear had filled every inch of my world. The pencil felt strange in my hand at first, but as I drew, my mind quieted. The lines became a release, faces, streets, light reflected in puddles. Things that were real, but safe. When Dante saw the sketches later, he said quietly, "You should keep doing that." "I didn't know you liked art," I said. "I like anything that proves people can make beauty after pain." He said it so simply that I didn't know how to respond. Days passed like that, quiet, steady, almost peaceful. But peace doesn't erase everything. It just teaches you how to live beside what happened. Sometimes I still woke up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, certain I'd heard Marcus's voice. I'd walk to the balcony and breathe until the fear passed. Dante never said anything when he found me there. He'd just stand beside me, silent and patient, until the shaking stopped. One night, he said softly, "You're not haunted by him. You're haunted by who you were when he hurt you." I looked up at him, startled. "How do you always know what to say?" "Because I spent years being haunted too," he replied. That was the first time he told me about his father in more detail, the man who built an empire through violence and tried to mold Dante in his image. The man Dante eventually walked away from, even though it cost him everything. "Every empire falls," he said quietly. "I just wanted mine to fall on my own terms." "And did it?" "Not yet," he said, smiling faintly. "But it will." We stood in silence, the wind cold but clean against our faces. I realized then that Dante wasn't just protecting me, he was teaching me how to protect myself, even from my own memories. And for the first time, the world didn't look like a trap. It looked like a door I could finally walk through. A month later, Clara arrived early one morning with something unexpected in her hands, an envelope with gold edges. She handed it to Dante first, but her eyes flicked toward me. "What's that?" I asked. Dante turned it over, his expression unreadable. "An invitation." "From who?" "Marcus's replacement," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. "He has a replacement." In this world, power never stays empty for long. He opened the envelope and read it aloud. "Mr. Moretti, you are cordially invited to attend the annual Benefactors Gala, hosted in honor of the city's restoration projects. Attendance requested to discuss upcoming negotiations and partnership terms." Clara folded her arms. "It's bait." Dante nodded. "Probably. But it's also an opportunity." "For what?" I asked. "To show them that their shadows don't reach this far anymore." I frowned. "You're going to go?" "Yes." "Is that safe?" He gave a half smile. "Safety is a luxury, not a rule." I hated how easily he said that. Later that evening, as I sat sketching by the window, he came over with something draped over his arm. "For you," he said. It was a dress, a simple, elegant black one. "I can't wear that," I said. "I'm not." "You are," he said firmly. "You're coming with me." "What?" He met my eyes. "They need to see you alive, Adriana. Not as a ghost in their rumors, but as proof that they don't win." I hesitated. "I don't know if I can face that world again." He stepped closer, his voice low and calm. "Then we'll face it together." I looked at the dress again, fingers tracing the soft fabric. It wasn't about vanity or beauty, it was about strength, about being seen again. "All right," I said finally. "Together." The night of the gala arrived under a sky filled with thin clouds and silver light. Dante drove, dressed in a dark suit that fit him like armor. I sat beside him, nerves fluttering in my stomach. When we arrived, cameras flashed near the entrance of the tall glass building. I felt the old panic threaten to rise, but Dante's hand brushed mine, just a light touch, steadying, grounding. "Breathe," he whispered. "You belong here." Inside, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and the hum of polite conversation. People turned as we entered, curiosity flickering across their faces. They knew who he was. They didn't know who I was. Dante guided me through the crowd with effortless control, nodding to a few familiar faces. I followed, head held high even though my heart raced. A man approached, a tall figure with pale eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. "Mr. Moretti," he said smoothly. "We've been waiting for you." "Seems I'm hard to forget," Dante replied. "And this must be." The man's gaze slid to me, assessing. "Someone who survived what your kind tried to destroy," Dante said. His tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The man's smile faltered. "We all make mistakes. Yours cost lives," Dante said evenly. "Remember that." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Then Dante turned to me. "Come on. We've made our point." As we walked away, whispers followed. I felt eyes on me, but this time, they didn't make me shrink. They made me stand taller. Later, when we stepped out into the cool night air, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "You did well," Dante said quietly. "I was terrified," I admitted. "Fear means you're alive," he said. "It's what you do with it that matters." We stood under the streetlight for a long time. The city glowed around us, the same city that had once swallowed me whole. Now, it felt different, like it finally recognized me. "You really think they'll leave us alone now?" I asked. "For a while," he said. "Long enough for you to decide what comes next." "What if what comes next isn't without you?" He looked at me then, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "Then maybe I stop fighting the city and start living in it again." We drove back in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of things said and unsaid, of lives rebuilt from ruin. When we reached the safe house, Dante stopped before getting out of the car. You were brave tonight, he said. I had someone beside me who doesn't back down, I replied. He smiled, small but real. Then maybe we both found something worth staying for. That night, as I took off the dress and looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a different person. Not the girl who had run barefoot through the rain, but a woman who had walked back into the light and stayed there. Later, as the city slept, I stood by the balcony one last time. The skyline shimmered like fireflies, endless and alive. Somewhere inside that maze of lights, a younger version of me was still running, still fighting. But I wasn't her anymore. Behind me, Dante's quiet voice filled the air. You did more than survive, Adriana. You changed the story. And for the first time in my life, I believed that the story, the one that began with fear, might end with peace. Time moves differently when you're not running anymore. Days begin to have shape. Mornings start with light, not panic. Nights end in silence, not whispers behind locked doors. I woke every day now to the quiet hum of the city, traffic in the distance, the sound of people beginning their lives. I would lie there for a few moments, just listening, reminding myself that this was real. After the gala, something shifted inside me. Standing in front of those people who once looked at me like I didn't exist and refusing to hide had changed something fundamental. Fear hadn't disappeared, but it had learned its place. It no longer controlled me, it just followed quietly, like a shadow I could step out of whenever I wanted. Dante noticed the change. He never said much, but I could see it in the way he looked at me, less like someone he had to protect, more like someone he respected. He was quieter these days, though. The war that had defined him was over, but I sensed he didn't know what to do with the silence that followed. One afternoon, I found him sitting in the courtyard behind the safe house, the sun soft on the stone. He was holding a small photograph, faded around the edges. I recognized the face instantly. Your sister? I asked gently. He nodded, still staring at it. Lucia. She lives in Milan now. She doesn't know half the things I've done. I'd rather she remembers the version of me that used to read her stories and fix her bike. She must miss you. She does. But she also knows distance keeps her safe. I sat beside him. You don't get tired of carrying everyone else's safety? He smiled faintly. I do. But some habits keep me alive. There was something about his tone, soft, thoughtful, that made me realize Dante was a man built from contradictions. He could command an entire city, but he still remembered how to be gentle. That evening, we cooked together again. It had become something of a ritual between us. He handled the pasta, I handled the sauce. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The rhythm of small tasks, the chop of vegetables, the hiss of the pan, spoke its own language. When we finally sat down to eat, he said, "You've stopped flinching." I paused mid-bite. What do you mean? When people talk. When doors close. When I walk into a room. I thought about it, then smiled. Maybe I finally believe you when you say I'm safe. His eyes softened. You always were. You just didn't know it yet. After dinner, he poured 2 glasses of wine, something he rarely did. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. To survival, I said. He shook his head. No. To living. The wine was dark and smooth, warming as it went down. For the first time, it didn't taste like escape. It tasted like arrival. Later that night, I sat by the balcony while Dante worked in the other room. The city glowed beneath us, alive and restless. But I didn't feel small in it anymore. I realized then that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's learning how to live with what remains. And what remained between Dante and me was something quiet, steady, unspoken. A trust that had been built not from promises, but from presence. The next morning brought a strange calmness, the kind that always comes before change. I didn't know it yet, but the day would mark the start of something new, not a battle, but a choice. Clara arrived just after sunrise, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. The city's quieter than it's been in years, she told Dante. Your name carries more peace than threat now. Dante gave a small nod. That's how it should be. I watched them from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand. It was strange to see him this way, at ease, in control, but without the edge of war. After Clara left, he turned to me. "There's something I need to ask you." I set the mug down. "All right. I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about what comes next. For both of us." The words made my stomach tighten. "Next?" He nodded. "You've been here for months. You've rebuilt. You've healed. You don't owe this place or me your silence anymore." "I'm not staying because I owe you," I said quietly. "I'm staying because I want to." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's enough." We spent the morning walking through the city. No guards. No plans. Just walking. The sun was bright but gentle, the streets full of the small sounds of normal life. At one point, we stopped by a bridge overlooking the river, the same one I had crossed the night I ran barefoot through the rain. The memory hit hard, but it didn't break me. "This was the bridge," I said softly. Dante glanced at me. "Where it began and ended," I said. He shook his head. "No." It paused. "You started living again afterward." I smiled faintly. "You have a habit of rewriting my endings." "I prefer better ones," he said. We leaned on the railing, watching the water move beneath us. The river was calm, catching sunlight like glass. "I used to think I'd never come back here," I said. "That if I did, I'd fall apart. And now it feels like a chapter closing." He nodded slowly. "That's what healing feels like. Not forgetting, just learning how to turn the page." We stood there in silence for a while, the city's noise fading behind us. After a while, Dante said, "You could go anywhere, you know. Milan, Paris, wherever you want. You don't need this city anymore." "Maybe I do," I said. "Maybe I need to prove to myself that I can stay without being afraid." He studied me for a long moment. "You're stronger than you think." "Maybe I learned from someone good," I said, smiling slightly. He chuckled. "Don't flatter me. I'm only half decent." "Half decent is better than most," I teased. The sunlight reflected in his eyes when he turned to look at me. "So what now?" he asked. "Now," I said, "we live. Whatever that looks like." That evening, Dante took me to a small restaurant tucked between two quiet streets. No guards. No chaos. Just soft music, candles, and the smell of roasted herbs and lemon. It felt almost unreal, this simplicity after everything that had happened. We sat by the window, watching the city's heartbeat pulse through the glass. "I don't know if I'll ever get used to this," I admitted. "To what?" "To feeling calm." "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to keep showing up for it." I smiled. "That sounds like something you'd tell yourself." He laughed softly. "Maybe it is." We ate, we talked about small things, about nothing and everything. For the first time, I realized how easy it was to just exist beside him without needing to define anything. When we stepped outside after dinner, the sky had turned deep blue, dotted with faint stars. The air smelled like rain again, though the clouds held off. As we walked back, Dante said, "You ever think about what you'd tell that version of yourself who was running that night?" I thought for a moment. I'd tell her that one day, she'd stop running and that when she did, the world would look different. Softer. Kind, even. He nodded thoughtfully. And what would she say back? That she didn't believe me. He smiled. "Then it's good you proved her wrong." We reached the safe house just as the first drops of rain began to fall. Standing under the awning, I looked at him and said quietly, "You know, it's strange." "What is?" "I used to think survival was the end of the story. But it's not. It's just the beginning." He looked down at me, rain glinting in his hair, and said, "Then let's make the rest of it count." And for once, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like someone alive, fully, completely alive. Later that night, as I lay in bed, the sound of rain filled the house. It wasn't the storm that once chased me, it was a lullaby, a rhythm of renewal. I realized that peace isn't a place you find. It's a choice you make, over and over, until it becomes home. And somehow, against all odds, I had found mine. I woke one morning to sunlight spreading across the wooden floor, a warm, golden quiet that filled the safe house. The city was awake, but it felt distant, muted somehow. It had been months since that night of rain and running, and I still sometimes caught myself expecting the old fear to return like a sudden knock at the door. It didn't. The days had slowed into something steady. Dante's world was calmer now, the sharp edges of danger replaced with a strange sort of order. He still had meetings, phone calls, and the occasional late night that smelled faintly of tension, but the constant threat was gone. I spent more time outside, walking, drawing, listening. The city that once frightened me now felt like a story I was learning to rewrite. One afternoon, I found Dante in his office, leaning against the desk with his sleeves rolled up, reading something thick and formal. "You look serious," I said. "I'm signing the last of it," he replied, setting the paper aside. "The business is transferring to new management. I'm stepping back." I froze. "You're leaving that life?" He nodded. "It's time. Peace doesn't mean much if you keep feeding the war." I walked closer. "What will you do instead?" He smiled faintly. "I haven't decided. Maybe I'll finally learn what it's like to live without always looking for the next fire to put out." I thought of the man who had once seemed carved from steel, steady, cold, invincible. Now he looked different. Softer, not weaker, lighter, not lost. "That's a big change," I said. He met my eyes. "You taught me how to stop surviving long enough to see what's left after the fight." I didn't know how to answer that. Gratitude and disbelief tangled together in my throat. Instead, I said, "So what happens to all this? The guards, the safe houses, the power you've built. Some of it stays. Some of it fades. The city will move on, like it always does. And maybe this time, it will move without me watching over its shoulder." He walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "I used to think control was safety," he said quietly. "But all it ever did was keep me alone." "Maybe it wasn't control you wanted," I said. "Maybe it was peace." He turned then, and his smile was small but real. "Maybe." That evening, I cooked dinner again, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, the kind of meal that filled the house with comfort. Dante opened a bottle of wine, and we ate by candlelight, not because it was planned but because it felt right. Halfway through the meal, he said, "You should start thinking about where you want to go next." I frowned. "Next?" He nodded. "You've built your strength back. You could go anywhere, study, work, disappear if you want to." "I don't want to disappear," I said softly. "Not anymore." "Then what do you want?" I hesitated. The truth was simple but terrifying. "To stay. At least for now." His eyes softened. "You don't have to decide tonight." "I already have," I said. He didn't argue. He just poured me another glass of wine and said, "Then we'll make tomorrow a new beginning." That night, I dreamed of light. No storms, no running, just a city filled with open doors and clear skies. The next morning, Dante surprised me. He stood by the door with 2 cups of coffee and a small envelope. "We're going somewhere," he said. "Where?" "You'll see." We drove out of the city, through narrow streets and along the coast until the skyline faded behind us. The air grew clearer, touched by salt and the faint cry of gulls. After an hour, the car stopped near a quiet cliff that overlooked the water. The ocean stretched endlessly, sunlight breaking across it like silver shards. "It's beautiful," I said. "It used to be my father's favorite place," Dante replied. "He came here before he died. I never understood why until I needed a place that didn't ask anything of me." I looked at him. "And now? Now it's yours too." We stood there together, the wind lifting strands of my hair, the sea roaring below. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Dante said quietly, "You know, I used to think peace was something you had to fight for. But maybe it's something you choose. Like forgiveness." "Exactly," he said. "Even if you're forgiving yourself." The words settled deep inside me. I realized then that everything, the running, the fear, the pain, had led to this moment. To standing on the edge of the world with someone who had seen both darkness and light, and somehow learned to live in both. When we left the cliffs, the sun was already dipping low, painting the sky in amber and rose. I turned to him and said, "You were right. The world really is bigger than the fear." He smiled. "I was hoping you'd see that." The last chapter of any story doesn't always come with a grand ending. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a whisper of wind through open windows. It had been 3 months since Dante stepped away from his empire. The city changed around us, still loud, still flawed, but different. Softer somehow, as though the absence of war had allowed it to breathe again. We moved into a smaller apartment downtown. No guards, no codes, no cameras, just wide windows and the sound of traffic below. For the first time, I unpacked without fear of leaving in a hurry. Life became ordinary, and ordinary felt extraordinary. I took art classes at a local studio, rediscovering the part of me that had been buried beneath fear. The smell of paint and paper, the quiet scratch of pencil, these things became anchors. Every line I drew felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Dante found his own rhythm too. He spent mornings reading by the window, afternoons walking through neighborhoods he once ruled from afar. People still greeted him with respect, but the edge was gone. He wasn't the city's shadow anymore. Sometimes we would meet for coffee near the park. He'd listen while I talked about art, exhibitions, color theory, things that seemed a world away from the violence that once surrounded us. "You talk about light like it's a person," he said once, amused. "Maybe it is," I replied. "It just takes time to notice it again." He smiled. "You found yours." "So did you," I said. He didn't argue. That evening, we walked home through the quiet streets. The air smelled like rain again, soft, clean. The kind of rain that doesn't chase anyone. As we reached our building, I said, "Do you ever think about the night we met?" He glanced sideways, smiling. "All the time." "What do you remember most?" "The way you looked at me when I said you were safe," he said. "Like you wanted to believe it, but didn't know how. And now? Now you don't need me to say it anymore." I laughed softly. "Maybe not. But it still sounds nice when you do." We reached our door, and as I unlocked it, the lights from the street caught his face, the same face that had once been hard as stone, now calm and open. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and warmth. The life we'd built wasn't grand, but it was ours. Dante sat by the window while I unpacked a canvas and started sketching. Outside, the rain deepened into a steady rhythm, tapping softly against the glass. "What are you drawing tonight?" he asked. "The city," I said. "But not how it looks, how it feels." He tilted his head. "And how does it feel?" "Alive," I said. "Finally alive." He watched me for a while, then said quietly, "You've come farther than anyone I've ever met." "So have you." He didn't reply. He just smiled, the kind of smile that carried peace instead of pride. As the night went on, I kept drawing the skyline, the rain, the faint suggestion of 2 figures standing on a bridge. When I finished, I looked at it and realized it wasn't a picture of fear or escape. It was a portrait of survival turned into life. When I showed Dante, he studied it for a long moment before saying, "It's us." "Yes," I said. "But it's also everything we left behind." He nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the sketch. "Then it's perfect." We sat together in the quiet after that. The city murmured outside, 1,000 stories unfolding at once, each one a reminder that life doesn't stop, it changes shape. As the rain eased, Dante reached out, resting his hand over mine. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we face it the same way we faced the storm, together." I looked at him, at the life we'd built from the ruins, and felt something settle inside me. Not fear. Not longing. Just peace. I smiled. Together. The city lights shimmered against the window, and for the first time, I saw them not as a maze but as a map, a constellation of beginnings waiting to be written. The wolves beneath the city were quiet now. The night was still. And somewhere in the quiet, I finally understood. Survival was never the end of my story. Living was. If this story pulled you in, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for more cinematic storytelling, and drop a comment with what moment hit you hardest. Your voice keeps these stories alive, and your support helps the next chapter rise from the shadows.